Mike Perlack here to entertain you with the help of Laura Branigan. Deep in the dark, oh, you know there's thunder in our heart. Oh, that song sounds familiar. Could it be a tune from another song? I just finished a 12-hour shift. I'm all hopped up. I decided to make a video. So I spent the day listening to Laura Branigan. Of all the tapes I have, of course, I think Self-Control is, well, that and Gloria is probably still amongst some of the songs of hers that still get requested to this day. But another song called Down Like a Rock sounds to me like Can't Turn Me Loose from the Blues Brothers. An album she did in '85 features some tracks that other people have done since. I Found Someone. I think that track went a little farther when Cher did it in the 90s. Forever Young, I want to be forever young. I think somebody else covered that in more recent musical history. And of course, her version of The Power of Love, which was the first version I've ever heard when I was like 4 or 5. When Celine Dion did it, I remember being frustrated because you never heard Laura Branigan's version, or even Jennifer Rush's version for that matter, and she's the one who wrote it. The Celine Dion version is good. She did a good job with it, but I always wondered why at the very end of her version, during the ad-lib part, she says, "Now here's mud in your eyes." And like I said, I worked a 12-hour shift, so at some point I had to shift gears a little bit, and I listened to Debbie Gibson. I always, Out of the Blue is a cute album. I still have a soft spot for that Only in My Dreams song. And then I listened to 1989's Electric Youth, Debbie Gibson, and I recollected a childhood memory. The time my father and my sister were watching the video for the Lost in Your Eyes song that she did. Now, under my father's male feminist narcissist authority, we had cable in the living room, but we weren't allowed to sit in the room and watch. We had to watch from the entrance of the room under my father's rule. But anyways, so I recollected a childhood memory of my father and my sister watching that video while I was sitting down in the dining room table. The only place that we could be that my father was at ease, or with our asses glued to those chairs. We weren't allowed to get up and walk around. Anyways, when my father and my sister are done watching that video for Lost in Your Eyes, they come into the room where I was and sit down at the table, and my father says to my sister, "You know, the guy in that video did have stars in his eyes." I was like 10, 11 probably at the time. But even then I was thinking, why the hell is my father talking about some dude on a music video with stars in his eyes? Of course, years later, my father would go to a Backstreet Boys concert with my sister and scream, "Nick! Nick!" Which reminded me of the Who's the Boss show when the daughter Sam goes on her first date and Tony Maselli has to tag along. I imagine that's what it must have been like for my sister. Okay, I'll get serious for a moment. All jokes aside, I don't think my father is a homosexual. But I think what it is being a male feminist, he has no clue who he is. He is completely out of touch with anything masculine. Probably why he saw fit to beat me as a child, because I called him dad in front of some underage girl that he was trying to get with. But given his upbringing, it's no doubt, it's no wonder he is a male feminist. My grandmother's philosophy growing up, and I didn't know this at the time, I was just a child. But when I look back now, her philosophy was, why should we do what the government will do for us? And my father would brag about this, about how his mother's so smart, she knows how to play the system. She owned property. I've talked about this before on my channel. She owned property, at a time when it was not common for a female to own property. My grandfather was an immigrant. All he did was go to work, give his wife his paycheck, and moan and groan and bitch. So she had one hell of a retirement that she blew bailing out Sonny Boy, bailing him out of trouble. But even her retirement was not enough to avoid him having that felony on his record. Child abuse is a felony, folks. Well, there was a time you could buy yourself out of that stuff. But even my grandmother's retirement wasn't enough to buy my father's way out of that felony of child abuse. Now, I'm sure my grandmother meant well. I'm not saying she was a malice or consciously vindictive. It is what it is. And what it is a male... what it is a feminine mindset. A feminine mindset versus a masculine mindset aimed at problem solving. Men and women's brains are different, no matter how feminism wants you to believe otherwise. I sometimes wonder if the authorities hadn't had to intervene, would I have eventually become the boss of that house, and my grandmother would follow my lead. One thing, because that makes me think of that is, I went to we all went as a family thing. We went to a party once at an uncle of mine's house, and he had slot machines in his basement, and he let us play the slot machines, and we were allowed to keep the money if we won. Now, I was probably 10 at the time, and it didn't take me long to figure out that the nickel one lets you win the most. I must have went home with $10 in nickels that day. And to a 10-year-old, $10 is a small fortune. But I distinctly remember my grandmother asking me if it was okay if she gave those nickels to my father for toll, and she would give me the cash. Which of course I was like, to give you an idea what a swell guy my uncle was. Not only did he let us keep the money when we won playing his slot machines in his house, but he supplied the nickels, dimes, and quarters. I distinctly remember he had a cottage cheese container or whatever of nickels, dimes, and quarters next to the corresponding slot machines. All right, I gotta go home. I got a stack of notes. When I get an idea of stuff I want to talk about on this platform, I write it down on a piece of paper on these note cards and keep them in my pocket. And I'm going to have to make a system where I go through the note cards and make a video about it. I also figured out how to play Loneliness is the Killer by Bush. I'm going to have to do a video where I do that. Alright, that's enough. Mike Perlak, thank you for your time.